Are you a blogger looking for creative ways to build backlinks to your blog posts? In this video, I'll walk you through 8 specific ways that I create custom backlinks to my blog posts. My name is Casey, and I'm the founder of bloggingguide.com. So, the first of the link building strategies that I'll cover are testimonials. What's a testimonial? It's basically, it can be a lot of things, but in this case, it means that usually you try to offer up some sort of review of a product and make the person who owns that product aware of the review. And there's a good chance that in the process of them trying to build social proof, that they'll include your review on their site. So in all of these examples, I've included specific instances where I've done this. So sometimes, and this is a great trick, is to look on Twitter. If somebody is like an indie hacker and they have like a software program, some sort of SaaS computing tool, there's a good chance that they know that their users are on there and they'll basically offer up, a backlink in exchange for the testimonial. And usually you can tell them to direct this to whatever site or wherever you want. So, although almost all of these examples link back to my main site, Blogging Guide, I could have just used any of them. So, as you can see, Ian posted asking if anyone wants a DR18 backlink. So, he was basically looking for testimonials for his URL monitor tool, which is a great tool. And I do use this tool. So, it was an easy fit. I replied to him, and you can see my review on the right there. I just responded to his tweet, and I said, I've used URL Monitor across my portfolio of 35 plus sites. It has successfully indexed thousands of pages for me in just a few weeks, a must-have tool when building sites at scale. And as you can see below, this is after the link had some time to index. URL Monitor, the tool, now has a do follow backlink pointing to Blogging Guide. So whether you're finding people who need testimonials, or you're finding or you do the opposite, where you think of products you use, write very, positive, useful, and usually specific testimonials, and then just volunteer those. Just say, reach out to the company, say, hey, I loved your product. And by the way, if you ever need a testimonial, I'd be more than happy to provide one. And this is a pretty successful tactic because, like I said, at some point, these companies all need some level of social proof. So they'll need your testimonial. If it's a really popular product, it might be a little harder. This tends to work best for newer tools. So you want to look for something that doesn't already have a testimonial page with dozens of reviews, since they may not need your contribution at this point. The second way that I like to build free backlinks is to basically go on podcasts as a guest. And this, answers a lot of the questions I get, which are basically like, what's in it for people that go on these various podcasts? Do they get paid? Do they get, to promote their product? And sometimes both of those are true. Sometimes people pay for people to appear on podcasts, and a lot of times they let you plug your product. But really, for me, the simplest and most obvious benefit of going on a podcast is you'll get a bunch of high DR backlinks from the podcast. This is because usually if a site has its own syndicated podcast, it's pretty well established domain authority wise. And even if it's not, as long as they syndicate their podcast through various platforms, making sure they're on Spotify, Apple, some of these other sort of random sites. These are all actually really high DR sites, and most of them are do follow links. So As you can see in the example, I have some very relevant ones because I'm obviously talking about blogging. So I went on the Do You Even Blog podcast. I went on the Niche Pursuits podcast, which is coming up in one of those links, but is syndicated on another site. And I also did the Blogging Millionaire podcast. And all of those basically, yeah, even if you don't get the do follow link from the main site, you'll get it from a few of these like DR 50 to 70 sites that syndicate the show notes. The one thing to note here is just make sure, usually people who run podcasts understand how this works, but before you agree, just clarify that they'll include a link to your product or your page or your website in the show notes. And most people who run podcasts understand this is how it works. So this one's pretty easy to do. You do have to obviously, well, if you do a video interview, you have to appear on video. Audio podcasts will still index. Spotify, Apple, all that will index the individual episodes. So if you aren't comfortable getting on video, an audio one's pretty easy to do. And if you really want to be creative here, or you're just not comfortable sharing your identity, you can actually use some AI voice tools to basically conduct the interviews for you. I've done this for a couple of my niche sites. I've gone on specific podcasts and had like basically pre-recorded answers because I knew the questions, because sometimes the hosts will send those to you in advance. But the main thing is, however you do it, podcasts are a great way to get these backlinks. And most importantly, these are the type of backlinks that Google knows signal that you're a real person. Again, as I noted, you can sort of game this using kind of more complex technology, but generally speaking, for this to really work, a real person needs to show up, and usually that acts as sort of a good filter. The third way that I like to build backlinks are pretty much to do a series of statistics articles on any of my niche sites. So in the case of Blogging Guide, to give you some examples, I don't actually get a ton of traffic on my Medium articles. That is, articles about how to write on Medium. I have a course and I have a bunch of valuable information, but I don't get nearly as much traffic as, say, somebody who's writing about developing a site and building it with WordPress. So there's not a huge amount of traffic. So you might wonder, why do you spend all this time, Casey, on all these posts? Well, as you can see, a lot of big publications are looking for some basic stats to cite. And in this case, I offered up basically just, these are already stats that Mediavine or that Medium has released. And I collected them from various emails as soon as they were released. They usually don't put these out in a press release. They're just kind of informal milestones, but only somebody who's a subject matter expert would probably be the one getting these emails. So post these stats on your site, get that article ranking. And yeah, even if a lot of people aren't looking for it, if you have a concrete stat, like Medium has 700,000 paid subscribers, that was good enough to get on Niche Pursuits in an article. Or if you talk about the monthly reach of Medium being 182 million, that got on SpySerp, DR50. And then probably the best one here, just talking about the growth rate of Substack subscribers. This is a Substack statistics page. Shows that they've jumped by 45x since founded in 2018. And this got featured on Exploding Topics, which is DR84. So those are really good links, and I got those pretty quickly. Like, I had the articles around for a while, and I went back and added these stats when I was updating them. So the articles had the advantage of already ranking, but that if you have articles that are already ranking, it's always worth making one or two like very statistics heavy, so that if a journalist or another blogger or whoever is needing to cite a stat, they can find you and they have a site and a source to link to, especially if it's some sort of data that they can't find the official stat elsewhere. This is extremely valuable to both you and the journalist. So the fourth strategy is, well, there's not a great word for it, but it's basically to submit your website to various showcases or databases. And what do I mean by that? So using Blogging Guide again as an example, I submitted. So the, basically, when you create a website, you use all these different tools, themes, plugins, all these different applications. And a lot of these, kind of like the testimonials, but a little different, a lot of these want to showcase some of the nicer examples of people using their tool. So one of the plugins that I use on Blogging Guide is Divi Supreme. The basic Divi theme is very popular, and I think they have a showcase, but I think they only showcase really big sites that use it because millions of people use Divi. But Divi Supreme is like an offshoot. It's like a secondary plugin, and not as many people use it. So they have a showcase page at divisupreme.com/showcase. And I went on there, and a few months back, I submitted Blogging Guide. And, like I said, everybody, this can be just find a plugin, find something with your theme, and basically submit it to these sites. And it usually takes a while. And yeah, you need to fill out a couple forms, provide a couple screenshots. But then, yeah, if they like it and if it looks nice, they'll usually feature it. Obviously, you should make sure you're actually using the tool or product. And in most cases, it'll be pretty obvious to them. So I wouldn't suggest submitting a bunch of bogus uh, showcase submissions. Only submit to things that are actually applicable to your site. Similarly, um, the the second backlink on here is from one of my favorite sites, detailed.com. And you might wonder how I got this feature, or like you would assume it's just a random, citation. But if you look at it, they actually, Detailed has a list of top blogs or websites by category. And this is why it's important to do some digging, because up until a few months ago, anyone could submit a site to Detailed. And since there were a lot of categories and they showed the top 50 sites, as long as you picked a specific enough category, or if your site legitimately had a lot of traffic or social mentions, you'd probably make that top 50 list. So even in a fairly competitive category, I submitted Blogging Guide under marketing blogs. Basically, yeah, I submitted it, and a couple weeks later, it appeared on this list. Since then, I think enough people found this that they've stopped taking submissions. So now they'll just add sites either programmatically or periodically manually. But this is just a good example. You wouldn't think that this great DR72 site would just let you submit any site to the database, but you could. And I submitted other sites besides Blogging Guide, and they took them too. So I guess the moral there is really look for, the sites you want to be featured in, and really dig through all their technical pages, because this site was fairly well known, and it still was looking for new sites for a database. So you might get lucky. And the third example is really more just a reiteration of the previous one, but there's this site written.com that's a DR71. And basically, I didn't even have to submit this because this site was largely just scraping the detailed list of the top 50 marketing blogs. So that's kind of the other point as to why these are so worthwhile. Even if you have to manually reach out via email, you should always do this. Take a shot at niche relevant ones like this, because not only do you get one backlink, a do follow for detail.com, but a couple of the copycat sites, which will have similarly high DR, will basically scrape and or steal some of the content, and they'll almost certainly include you in that list. So databases and showcases are honestly probably one of the most underrated ways to get these really high DR links for free. So if you didn't want to do the podcast suggestion earlier that I had for the number 2 method, for number 5 here I have written interviews. And there's really no excuse not to do these, because you don't have to appear on anything or like make yourself public. You can submit the content under whatever name you want. So if you're building like a niche site persona, you can do it under this name and establish some credibility. So as some examples, I just did an interview with a site called Let's Reach Success. It's DR59. And basically, yeah, in this case, the person reached out to me. And that's the advantage of once you start doing one or two of these, you'll get a steady flow of these coming into your inbox after a while, because the easiest way to find new guests for a site with interviews is to look at your competitors' sites and reach out to all those people that they've already validated and proven are niche site experts. So that's how she found me, Lydia, and reached out, and I just filled out a form. And in most cases, yeah, you can even get multiple do follow links. It depends on how they might have some restrictions, but it's pretty standard to get at least one, if not two, do follow links from this. Then I have two other examples. One is on this this series from Subkit called Go Solo. It was like just interviewing more generally kind of entrepreneurs and like online and internet entrepreneur types. So that's a DR77 site. And that I found just by going to the site. I was searching a competitor's name and I saw they had an interview on there. So I was like, why don't I get an interview on there? So I just sent them an email and they sent me a form. And, that's the nice thing. Unlike a podcast, which can take weeks or months to get published because they have to edit it. And depending on their schedule, they might already have a bunch of episodes scheduled in advance. So you never really know when those will be published unless you have a really high profile interview. But written ones, there's generally no need to space them out. They might even publish more than one per day or many per day. So in this case, yeah, I think that's what this site did. And then the third example was I, did a case study post on the Koala Writer blog, which, as most of you are probably familiar, that's the AI writing tool that I use and I talk about in a lot of my own case studies. So again, that was, yes, this takes a little bit of work, and ideally you should create some custom like graphics and stuff for these. But you don't have to. You can just reuse text. If you're already writing roundups or have a newsletter, especially a newsletter, because that's not probably index content, give them, some of the content that you've already written for your subscribers and, yeah, pass it along to any sort of site that does written interviews. And again, a lot of times they're really looking for content. That's like how they survive. That's their entire business model. So they're not very picky. So if you don't have a lot of experience, this is a really good way to start linking that Google Knowledge Graph to your name and making sure that Google associates you as a subject matter expert. So the sixth method for creating high domain authority backlinks, but ones that are also free, is to use custom images. And so I included 3 examples here. You can see there's one from an article on the best free aesthetic style Notion templates. The second one is how to share Canva templates. So that's just like a tutorial. And the third's also a tutorial talking about how to make an image blurry or clear in Canva. So in each of these, I try to make the custom image include a few unique elements. So and that's not just like an arbitrary thing. That's so that when I run these images through a Google reverse image scan, I want these images to come up as 100% unique, even though the individual components will typically be derived from stock images. So the free aesthetic Notion templates one, the people who are looking for this is like a sort of retro style. That's why there's like the little different retro stars and the foil overlay and the shapes and the sort of lighter color gradient. So that's why I designed it like that. So even if and the font I used is considered one of the leading aesthetic fonts. So anyone looking at this, in addition to seeing the title in Google search when the post ranks, they're going to see that, okay, visually, and Google will typically show the featured image if you can get it to rank high enough. They'll see that, okay, these are literally what I'm looking for. And that's going to encourage much higher click-through rate. In the second image, I just created a custom gradient background, that orange to dark purple. Then I had the text overlay, how to share Canva templates. And then I have 2 hands, which I cropped from a stock image site. So again, these are not unique to that I didn't make these, or these aren't my hands, but I cropped them and then gave them like a noir style filter that makes them that sort of black and white, grainy gray. And then I just added the folder and the arrow. And then on the third one, I basically was thinking, okay, if I'm trying to talk about adjusting blurriness or how clear you can see something, maybe a cool effect would be have the text in the middle, sort of like a periscope. So you're looking out over the water and it's clear in the middle, but then it becomes, foggier or kind of blurrier around the edge. So again, these all take time. You can't probably do this for if you're doing a lot of posts for every single one, but this is sort of the standard I do try to hold myself to, because these images get reused, and they can get reused on Pinterest and shared that way, which can be a great source of links. But even just individual content creators can use them. So I have 3 examples, and these aren't super high domain authority. They're DR 50, 50, and 41. But these are all do follow links, which I got backlinks from these exact images. So the strategy definitely works. And even you might wonder, why did they use such a specific image? Sometimes, yes, they're probably just a spammy site copying your article, but you can't really help that. They'll copy it whether you have the image or not. But if it's a decent site, what they might do is they might be writing a very similar article for instance, they might be writing a related Canva tutorial. And so they might, as a subheader, have like a few steps on how to share Canva templates. And that's where they would insert your image. Probably not as their featured image, but as a subheader image. And they'll probably, I'd say about 10% of the time, if they use an image like this, that's obviously not a stock image. Nothing with text is pretty much just a stock image, but especially these are clearly all custom. People tend to give you the link. Now, whether it's going to be do follow or not, the odds are, the percentage is a little lower, but still, like, these are all valid ways to get backlinks. And even though you don't tend to get really high domain authority links from this, a bunch of DR50 links is nothing to sneeze at when you're building your site up. So the seventh strategy for building cost-effective or free backlinks is to establish or define terminology specific to your niche. So again, using Blogging Guide as the example, a while back, I guess a little over a year ago, Google introduced the term EEAT. Previously, Google just used the term EAT, that acronym for the experience or expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. Now there's the experience and expertise for the EE part of that acronym. But basically, yeah, I wasn't literally the first person to report on the change, but I got an article up probably within a couple minutes of seeing like the Google's official announcement. And I created this little infographic on the left here, which is, again, piggybacking off the previous strategy. That's a good way to use a custom image because everybody's going to copy the text, from the original. But what might set you apart is the image. But basically, yeah, even though this is not my own terminology, if you pay attention and wait for things in your niche as there's new announcements, if you can be one of the first ones to get out there with a term, a bunch of people will cite you, and it's going to get news coverage because it's relatively new. That's how you discovered it. And so in this case, you can see you have SEO Timer or SEO Optimer, a DR78 site, basically, gave me exactly what I wanted. A link to my Google EEAT article with the right anchor text, higher EEAT scores. So that was one of several that I got from this burst of PR related to this article. Now, will I rank long term for this? It's tough to say. I've managed to stay on the first page, but since I beat most people to the punch, I was the first result for even just a few days, which is enough time for everybody else before they cannibalize your rankings. At least you can get the backlink. And honestly, a post that's going to bring in 10 DR70 plus links, I mean, that's worth it. Like, those are posts you should be publishing all day. Another example is you can find something that you're not making up the term and it's not someone else's term per se, but it's more like if there's a very specific industry sort of jargon that people use informally. So for me, I talk a lot about advertising, right? So there's a set of countries that ad networks prefer that are called tier 1 ad countries. But when I used to look for this, there never was a good, accurate list of which countries are tier 1 ad countries. So I wrote an article and basically explained my methodology, and I classified every country. And yeah, I included quotes from like Mediavine and Raptive. And yeah, I basically just did a really good job defining it, and I created some custom visuals showing the countries. And so basically, this is a pretty straightforward article I wrote on what are tier 1 ad countries, but it immediately got a few backlinks. And just as an example, you can see this site, which is Alt Animation, which is all about display ads. So it's hyper relevant, gave me a nice DR46 backlink. So terminology like that might take a little longer for people to cite you. And for this second one, you might need to have a little more authority, and or your site name might need to be, reasonably legit sounding. If you have a spammy site name like Top Toasters Online, that someone may not feel comfortable citing that, but blogging guide, that's simple enough that, and the, general authority is high enough that people will cite it. But yeah, I would always recommend that you either invent or, recycle the terminology that you see people using in your niche, especially if it's not well defined, because naturally then people are looking for it. If you've ever Googled what is blank when you were learning about, if you Googled what is some, like, I don't know, bacteria when you're setting up your fish tank that's causing this, certain type of growth in the tank, and you all of a sudden, you found this, potential term for it, and that's your niche. You write about fish and aquariums. Defining what that is, creating an image, and just making a very simple article on that can go a long way toward building backlinks. And the final strategy, the eighth one, is building in public. And I know you might say, well, that's kind of obvious, but there's a couple different ways you can build in public. You don't need to just do income specific case studies. People will cite you for all sorts of reasons. But if you have income related stuff, that's always great, because people always are curious about money and people are always looking for examples. So that's a big reason why I do all my monthly site reports. They don't get a ton of readers compared to my articles that cover broader topics, because people aren't searching for them. But the search intent is very high. Like, people are, like, the few people that are looking for these are manually looking every month for my next income report. So that creates brand mentions and citations in Google. And yeah, so like some of the examples here, I have a feature on travel blogging 101. Again, not crazy high domain authority, but it's super relevant. And they basically just cited one of my random months of my income report. So, there's nothing, I do that every month. There's nothing, that was just the most recent month at the time, I believe. Mediavine actually featured one of my income reports from back when I started blogging guides. So that's another good example. And then the third example here, I was talking about selling Canva templates, kind of the whole making money through digital products stuff. And I think I only had one article about this, and the goal was purely traffic, but I referenced that I had made upwards of a few thousand per month in the past on platforms like Etsy selling these templates. And when somebody eventually wrote an article for The Sun, very high DR80 site, they needed, to cite some examples of people making money. And that's a good way to stand out, even in an era of video, and where, you could say, well, when they reach out to like someone through help a reporter out, and they might, but they also, journalists are lazy. And if they see a site where somebody explains how they made money and they show screenshots of that, they'll cite that as a source. And that is pretty good proof. Again, you don't need to actually be talking about making money. It could be if you have a video game site and you're talking about how you reached X level or a certain amount of experience points or whatever. A gaming site might cite you just in passing because they need to, include some links if they're going to reference your content. But in general, whatever you do, regardless of what your site's about, there's always a chance to talk about what you're doing online. And that can be on usually social media. It can be through press releases. But it's just good to, even if you have a very, very small audience that might care about the meta of your business, it's important to keep those people updated. Those are the people who are probably far more likely to include you in various articles and roundups like this. Again, you don't make the money directly from this small subset of users because there's not enough of them. But if you're trying to get backlinks, which you need in order to rank higher and in order to get high traffic, then yeah, you should, about some percentage of your time should probably be spent on these link building strategies, especially if you don't have the money to spend and have someone else do it for you. And again, these are just some of the strategies I use for Blogging Guide. But I've used all 8 of these strategies across my other sites. Thanks for watching my video covering the 8 different link building strategies that I use to build high domain authority links for free. I hope you found all these strategies at least somewhat original or saw some specific value. If you want to learn more, you can always check out my website, bloggingguide.com, or you can schedule a one-on-one consultation or call. I'll include the link to that in the video show notes. And you can reach out to me at Casey Botticello on social media.